Hey guys, welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about work surfaces, what to tool on, cut on, glue on, all that kind of stuff. And we're just going to kind of go through there and I'll give you some tips on things that have worked for me and things that I use in my shop every day. So let's get to it. Alright guys, the first work surface that I'm going to talk about is my cut table. This cut table is 4 foot by 8 foot and the whole bench is covered in one solid piece of this cutting board material. It's a 1/2 inch thick 4x8 sheet. I think there's some plastic companies. There's a company out of San Antonio. I will try to find them and put a link in the description, but currently I do not have it. I had this cutting board given to me, this cutting board material. It was given to me by a man that works for me for a little while, and he didn't have any use for it, didn't have room for it, and he brought it to the shop and we used it, and when he left he said I could have it. So it's been on my bench since then. I love it. So before this was on my bench, I was using the dry erase board material. You can buy that in a 4x8 sheet at Lowe's, and it actually does work good as far as protecting your knife from dulling out as fast and stuff like that. But you know, that stuff, it's still not perfect, and it gets cut up and it gets nasty and it starts kind of getting a lot of cuts and grooves in it and stuff like that. As you can see with this table, it's got a lot of cuts in it and it's still very nice. The main reason for that too is this won't absorb any oil. Paint, stuff like that. I don't make a habit of doing any kind of repair work on my cut bench or anything like that, or oiling parts on it, and so that shouldn't be a problem. But you never know what happens and what you might have got somewhere or something like that, and then you roll a brand new side of leather down and it picks up oil off the bench. So you definitely don't want that to happen. So that's why I like the cutting board material or that dry erase board material that you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, just because it seems to have less chance of absorbing any kind of liquids or anything like that. If something does get on there, you're not going to forget about it. It soaks into the wood and then gets into your leather. So probably a little bit worried for nothing, but that's why I use it. But as far as this stuff, yes, if you can get it, it's really nice. But there is somebody in San Antonio apparently that does sell this, and as soon as I find out, I will add it into the description because I want another one. Okay, so as far as my workbench, this is my everyday workbench. This is the one I do most of the work on. It's the one right in front of my drawdown stands. And these benches were built when I bought the shop the first time back in 2004, 2003, somewhere around there. But these benches were in there. He had already built them, the man I apprenticed with. And so, but they're just plywood topped. It's 3/4 inch plywood and they're built with 2x6s, so they're very sturdy. They used to have a top on them that had organization stuff. I took all that off because I like to work with my saddle on my bench when I'm sewing riggings or trimming binders or anything like that. So it was in the way, so I took it off. It's more of an open top bench now. But it is just regular plywood. The bad part about it is you get all these holes in here and different things chip out from years of working on it and cutting things on it and stuff like that. The other thing that I would suggest that I didn't build this bench, but the other thing I don't like about is they use nails in here, and I would have countersunk some screws just because I've hit these nails in the top of this bench with a knife before and it's ruined my day. Because by the time you get the tip of a knife just right, where it's nice and sharp, where you want it, and then you run it across a nail, it just ruins everything. So that's the only thing I would suggest. Countersink some screws if you are going to screw the top on, or if you're a wood craftsman, which I'm not, and I'm sure there's some way to attach the top without having any screws or nails on the top of it. The other part of my bench, I do have a marble slab on my bench. The main purpose of this is it is a good surface for hammering on, so if you're gluing things together and you want to get a nice firm adhesion on there, belts, pretty much anything I glue together, I lightly hammer in place after I put the two pieces together, and that marble is a lot better on our ears and on the work. It's not quite as loud as if you were pounding on this. So that's another reason I have a slab of granite on the corner of my bench. Freddie has the same thing on the corner of his bench. The other thing is this surface here is great for skiving on, and so you can certainly use a piece of safety glass. I've seen people use that, like a windshield material. You know, they'll use that to skive on. To me, I don't like glass in my shop if I can completely help it, even though I have a big window right in the middle of my room. But I don't like just arbitrary glass because if it breaks, it goes everywhere and it's hard to clean up. And that safety glass I've dropped, like these glass slickers, I've dropped mine before, and they do break. They may not cut you, but they will break, and then I've got glass to clean up. So like I said, I would recommend marble. It works just as well as glass does. Keeps your all your skiving, keeps your knives okay and everything else. But that's the main reason for it here, is just mainly for hammering. It's a good clean surface. I can wipe it down with alcohol if I'm worried that there might be some antique or dye. I don't do any antiquing or dyeing over here, but I've picked up dye off this thing somehow. So that's the deal, is I like a surface I can clean. So if I've got something that's, you know, pretty much anything I work on, I try to keep as clean as possible till the end. But if I've got something I'm really worried about, I can actually go get something and wipe this down and clean that top and make sure that it's free of any kind of oil or dye or anything else that may stain the leather. So that's the reason for that. Yeah, so I've already talked about this one in some of my other videos, but the glue table, all this is you can use a table, a junkie bench. This was a junkie bench that I built. It's got 1/4 inch plywood on the top. It was just for gluing on. So you know, it's not very strong. So you can use a folding table, an old bench, whatever you want to do. But all this surface is just cardboard boxes. I took cardboard leather boxes, cut it to where it fit the top of this table, and nailed it in place. The reason I did that was just so that when this got, but the theory was when this got nasty, I could chunk it. What we found out was the more glue this thing got on it, the better it was. Because when you're gluing different parts and things like that, this thing's not sticky really at all, and it doesn't transfer glue to anything that I put it on, but it's got enough bump and grip and gnarl to it that whatever I'm gluing pretty well stays in place. I don't have to have one hand on the deal and one hand gluing. Now if it's a wallet, that's a different deal. But if we're gluing up, you know, like this notebook or whatever, I pretty much set that down and it's not going anywhere. It's not going to slide around on the table, and that aggravates me like crazy. And so, but if you want to do a glue table just like this and you don't have the space, what we used to do before I built these was you just take a piece of however much, you know, like say 2 foot by 2 foot or 3 by 3 or 3 by 2 or whatever of cardboard, and then start gluing on it. It's going to take a while to get glue on there. So you can take that piece of cardboard, set it on your bench or wherever you're working, glue all your parts on it. Then once you're done, you can take that off and slide it underneath your workbench or up against the wall or whatever. And over time, it'll build up this glue layer on there, and it'll be, you know, a nice kind of a glue mat that you can just put wherever you need to. But that's all this surface is. It's just a piece of cardboard with years of glue on it. Now, don't waste glue by putting glue all over your cardboard trying to build this up. For one, it ain't gonna come out near as good. You're gonna have these nice smooth streaks in there and all that. You need time to just let it pile and drip and drain and do its deal. It's not something you can create overnight. All right, so this bench y'all might not have noticed, and it's been in other videos and stuff, but you may not have been aware of it, but this is actually a Toulon bench. We use it as our pound bench now, is what I call pound bench. It's just for punching bag punches, end punches, setting rivets, doing anything where you're just going to be hammering on stuff and you need a lot of strength in that bench so that you don't get a lot of vibration. And so that's what this bench is. It used to be my main Toulon bench. It's got all kinds of storage in here and everything else, but this is actually a headstone, and it's probably 6 inches thick, and this thing is great because it's got a lot of weight to it. So when you hammer on it, it's nice, really nice to tool on. The only thing I like about it, it's not very big, and so which doesn't really matter. But if you know certain things, it just doesn't have a lot of work surface on here and stuff like that. So that's why I don't tool on it anymore. But I might someday again. But this thing is really good for setting rivets and punching in punches and oblong punches and stuff like that, just because of its density. It's so heavy. Like when you hit it with a maul, it's going to go there. I actually set my maker stamps on here on my fenders and things like that because I can get one good hit out of it and it stamps evenly. If your bench has a lot of vibration or your marble's not heavy enough, you'll get that vibration in there, and it makes it really hard to set the bigger stamps. So anything that you're doing like that, or even like punching a bag punch out or something like that, the sharpness of those tools actually it matters more than anything, but also a good sturdy surface that you're punching through. The only reason I use this bench is, like I said, obviously I'm not punching into the granite, but I put this rubber mat down. I've got a really dense rubber pad, and I'm not sure where this came from. We got it from a little company that was there locally that had a bunch of these scraps, and I don't know what they were doing with it, but it's a really, really dense black rubber. It almost feels like a plastic, but it's really, really kind of bendy like rubber is. But I've got a few of those, and that's what we use we just set it on top of the marble and punch whatever we're doing, punch holes, punch in punches, whatever we got to do. And then if we're going to set rivets, and I've got another piece of steel here is just a steel drop off, and solid steel, and that's my little anvil that I set rivets on. You've probably seen that in some videos. And we'll just set that on there. That takes all the noise out. It's not quite as loud in the shop, and it also, like I said, makes it really easy to set a rivet, really nice and clean. So a lot of these monument companies and stuff that do headstones, they'll have some seconds, or I guess they're not seconds, they're not going to reuse them, but they'll have some that they've put the wrong date on, or messed up a name, or somebody didn't come through with it and kept on living, I guess. I don't know, but they'll have some that are messed up in the back. Now that's the ones that our companies here locally don't actually do the engraving themselves. They send off for them, so they don't have any. But this one came out of one up in the Panhandle that a buddy of mine got for me, and he said that guy had 100 of them in the backyard, just kind of thrown out there, that he had, something happened, messed something up or whatever, spelled something wrong or whatever, and he couldn't do nothing with them. So we got them really cheap. But they are the best. They are super heavy, and they do need their own bench kind of built. But you can find them. You can get a hold of them and stuff. The only thing you really need to have a really good pound bench is just be sure that that bench is sturdy and that there's not a lot of vibration in it. So anything you can do that's kind of got some density to it, that's going to help a lot of your punch type tools. So this is our Rollin Table. We've talked about this before. It's not really a work surface, but I guess technically it is. But all it is just some wire. This is that little 1/2-inch wire, square stuff. So anything just really small, so that your conchos and stuff don't fall down in there and you lose them. But all it is a 2x4 frame. I took a piece of, this is actually some type of feed sign, like a feed sign you'd nail to a barn or something. It says Purina Feeds or whatever. That's actually what that is. But it's that thin metal, just sheet metal. And then I just bent it down in there to where it's nailed on the top, but then I pushed it in so it made a bow, kind of like a canoe, and then nailed it down on this side, and then put that wire over the top of it. And then what I have over here is just another piece of 2x4 that just kind of tilts it up just enough, just a little bit, so that oil will run down to one end. If not, it's going to run all over your bench. But that tin, that oil will drip off of whatever you're oiling, run down on that tin and run down. And then I've got a bucket there that's just kind of wired up at the end of this thing, and it's got a funnel with just a screen filter in it, and that'll catch any excess oil. So when that gets full, we'll reuse it. It actually does a really good job of catching the any kind of sediment and different things, especially when you're doing a repair, because there's all kinds of crap on these saddles that even after you wash them, they just kind of the old leather kind of coming off and stuff. So, but that makes a really good oiling surface, and you're not wasting oil, because if you dedicate just a bench with paper on it, you're going to have paper soaked in oil. The bench is eventually over years going to be soaked in oil, and it's just going to get really nasty. And so I highly recommend building some type of oiling rack or top like this that you can use, that'll kind of help you to conserve your oil, because you are wasting a lot if it's just soaking into the wood. But yeah, try one of those. If you can build one of these any size you need it. Court Saddlery years ago, theirs were really big. They had like big tables, and they could actually take them and put them underneath, so the girl could take a big drawer. They're basically big drawers. She could take one, put it on top, oil everything, put it back down, get another one, bring it up, oil everything, and she could just sit there and rotate through those drawers. And that's kind of where we got the idea. So, but I don't like to oil that much stuff at one time, so we just got the one. Antique table, die table, gross table. You don't need anything special for this. These are actually shelves. This is metal shelving. I just made it and set them up, or arranged them so that they basically make a long workbench, worktop, work surface. That's all you need. I've got storage down here, because then I just stick paper on top. This paper gets nasty, you get antique everywhere, you spill dye everywhere. Have a designated spot in your shop for dye, antique, and all the other nastiness that goes along with this. Because if you do this on your workbench, you will ruin projects. So have a gross table that's just for that, because that's all this is. You can see it just gets disgusting. So it's over here. It's kind of in the dark. I really need more light over here, because just so I can see a little better. But this table, that's what it's for. It's to spill and dye. So we do not bring belts over here that have been lined. We don't bring things over here that we don't want dyed. We don't bring things over here that we don't want antiqued. This is the gross table, and that's what it's for. But have your own designated gross table. It can be just a card table wrapped in cellophane. I don't care what you use. It doesn't really matter. Just something that that bench is not to work on, sit at, to do anything. Alright, so this is our paint table. This is where I do all the painting. This, like I said, kind of the same thing with the gross table, I guess. It can be anything, just some place for you to paint. I used to always paint at my Toulon Bench. I would get out and I would get a belt, grab the colors that I needed or anything, and I would sit there and do it. That's why the Toulon Bench has dye all on it, and that granite will dye. And so it's stained, and that's why. And so that's why at some point I had to figure out I need a designated spot. And as you can see in some of our older videos when we were at the other shop, the shop a couple of years ago, we just had literally just a little one of those folding white tables, and that's what we used. And you saw what that table looked like. It was covered in paint, covered in dye, covered in everything else. And so you just got to kind of sacrifice one of those tables if you're going to use one. So I built this. It's all it is 2 sawhorses with a sheet of plywood. I did kind of, you know, it was a little bit nicer plywood and kind of sanded and everything, but I stained it and just so it wasn't so ugly. But you don't need anything very special for that table. All you really need is just someplace that's comfortable and where you can have it. But again, it needs to be designated because it's kind of like the antiquing table. You know, the antiques and dyes and that kind of thing, you don't want to get them commingled with other parts of your workshop. So if you can have that kind of segregated where you need it to be so that you can protect your other items when you're working on them so you don't get some dye thrown around or spilled or something like that on anything. So, but that's the paint station. So we're finally back here at the final bench, which is my favorite bench of the entire shop for the most part, and that's the Toulon Bench. Just a good work surface. So this is not my, you know, my dream Toulon Bench or anything, but it works really good. The top on this is just a piece of granite. Now this is what we were talking about at the pounding bench over there, is that this is just countertop granite. So it's 1 1/4 inches thick, 1 1/8 inches, something like that. It's a really good surface. Mainly this one is because of how big it is for tooling wise, because it's 2 foot by 6 foot, a little over 6 foot. And so that amount of weight gives this whole bench a lot of density. The thing I did do when I set this down, because that thinner granite like that, it works fine. If you've got that, don't worry about it. But if you ever run across a headstone, grab it. Don't steal it. So if you have a countertop, sometimes you do get a little bit of bounce, stuff like that. As heavy as this one is, I don't feel that quite as much. But also as large as it is, I actually have a thin piece of foam in between this and my tabletop surface. And that just took a little bit of that shock out of there, a little bit of vibration. But if I'm setting a lot of set stamp stuff, I can feel it a lot more than if I'm just beveling and stuff like that. So, but that's my Tula Bench. Like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just need a nice piece of granite or marble. Now, I will say the lady that I got this from what she told me, granite is what you want more than marble. That marble is softer than granite, and so they're more apt to break versus the granite. So I don't know how true that is. I'm not a rock guy, so I don't know what the truth is there, but she's a professional countertop person, so I'm going to assume she would know what she was talking about. But this is granite, and luckily we've never broke it, and I've moved it 4 or 5 times, you know, around the shop, and then obviously moving shops. So, but it is for sure heavy. Another thing that I just did was I just added this here the last few days, I guess. I've seen Aaron use one there at Maker's Leather Supply. He has one of these, I think, on his bench. And I've been wanting to get some type of semi-dense pad between me and the rock, because when I'm tooling the thinner materials, I do go through that leather sometimes. And some of the tips of my tools, like my main beveler that I use all the time, it's not even checkered anymore. And I think that's a lot of the reason is because of, you know, the leather that I'm tooling is not that thick. For not so much belts, but like your wallets or thinner items, notebooks, stuff like that, you know, smaller books. And so if I'm tooling a fender or something, you got enough leather between you and the rock, it's not going to hurt anything. But he had recommended to me use a mat board, which would give you a little bit of cushion and allow you to get the depth still out of the thinner leathers. And then he actually told me about one of these too. So that's what I got. So it's actually, you know, a cutting board. It's got all the marks on it and all that, but that distracts me like crazy. So luckily the backside is just plain green, and I really like that. We'll see, just kind of a contrasting background. Sometimes I get a lot of glare off of this thing, but anyway, this cutting surface, that's my hopes, is to be able to just tool on top of this and it not have a problem, and hopefully the leather won't slide around quite as much. I think it's going to work pretty good. I'll keep you posted on that. Alright guys, that's all I've got on work surfaces. There's all kinds of things you can use. Those are just some of the things that I'm currently using in my shop. I'm always looking for different ways of making my job easier, making things better, making things more comfortable, things like that. So, but that'll give you some idea of kind of some of the different things to think about. If you're just working on one workbench and then cutting leather out on your bed in your apartment, And then I did all of that when I started out. So don't worry about it. You'll come along as you go along. If you're more experienced and you've got something way cooler than what I've got to cut on or to glue on or something like that, shoot me an email and let me know. Remember that it doesn't really matter how pretty it is as long as it works. As long as you can tool on it, as long as you can cut on it, as long as you can glue on it or oil on it or paint on it, whatever it is, that surface for that job, as long as it works for you, that's all that matters. So I appreciate you guys. I hope it helped you, and we'll see you in the next video. But like I said, this is an actual headstone. If you can get a headstone for a tooling surface, that's the best bet. But they're just really hard to get because it's dark and you're trying to back over them. And there's, you see flashlights in the distance. You got to hurry, and then once you do get them knocked over, you've got to pick them up and try to put them in the truck. It's really it's a whole deal, and then try to speed out of there and not run over another one because they seem to be everywhere, at least the place I get them from.